So I'm here with the intrepid Eco-Reformation team from Peace Lutheran in Burns, and we're reflecting on practice 6, which is reflect on our actions, to consciously reflect upon and evaluate our actions and the ways we use power in order to learn and grow into mature and courageous leaders. So I'm just going to go ahead and read the 4 dimensions of this practice and then just offer some brief reflections on some of the wisdom that I've been gaining from these practices. So in the personal dimension, we evaluate our actions and the ways we use or experience power, integrating what each experience has to teach us by regularly reflecting, praying, and or spending time in conscious relationship with the natural world. And I'll just say a brief moment about this, and that is that there's so much about our culture that doesn't just assume, but it praises busyness and moving from one thing to the next. And this practice is deeply countercultural in that way, because what we're inviting people to do is to not just go from one thing to the next, but to act or to have an experience, and then to take time, whether it's right after that experience or later in the day, at the end of the day, or even later, at another time, but to be conscious about the importance of reflecting on our actions, because that's how we grow. That's how we grow into mature and courageous people and leaders. And so this is a deeply countercultural practice that we're inviting people to. And that's just on the personal dimension. And now on the interpersonal, it says we reflect with others on our actions, as well as our experience and use of power, gaining wisdom from diverse perspectives and learning from one another. And that too it takes it the next step. So on the personal level, we have experiences in our lives, and then we think about those afterwards, and we might have some insights that come from that experience. And that's great, and that's perfect for what it is. But the interpersonal takes it the next step, where we are also then open and receptive to the insights and the perspectives that other people might bring. And that, and there we may experience really other people being our teachers, being our mentors, speaking perhaps a voice of truth or a spiritual truth that we can really learn from and gain wisdom from. And at the same time, it also challenges us to be willing to share our own insights with other people, taking our own perspectives and trusting our own perspectives enough to recognize that they're actually really important in the mix. Now, they're limited perspectives, always. We see through our own eyes, and yet nobody else sees through our eyes. And so that's the power, and that's the importance of that interpersonal dimension, knowing that our perspective is actually important. It's not the only perspective, but it is important to share in the mix. And then in the faith community dimension, it says we create a culture of reflection and evaluation within our communities, regularly assessing power dynamics and learning from our gatherings and actions in order to mature as leaders and communities. And here is really where, wow, this is where the real learning happens, I think, and the real transformation within our churches, within our congregations, within other groups that we have. When that practice of reflection becomes a part of the culture of a group, it takes it to a whole new level, because you see this part about regularly assessing power dynamics. How many times have we been in a meeting in our own church, or wherever it might be, and the meeting goes as it is, and then it ends, and then there's like little groupings of people out in the parking lot, or people talking afterwards saying, gosh, can you believe how much that person talked? Like, they took up all the space. Or, that person said something that was really hurtful, but nobody addressed it afterwards. And I don't think I'm going to go back to that group. How often does that happen? And yet, think about this. Think about if we created a culture of reflection, then, at the end of any gathering, we could say, hey, let's just take 5 minutes and reflect on that. Well, that's a space where then we can bring those things to consciousness. And we don't have to have the conversation in the parking lot, because we can say right in the meeting, that thing that you said, that was hurtful. And I think next time I'd like us to address that dynamic, because that's a dynamic I've seen and that can change everything. So that's a really transformative practice within faith communities. And then lastly, the public sphere. It says we collectively reflect on and evaluate the power dynamics of all public actions, including their impact on relationship development, leadership capacity, public systems, marginalized communities, and the natural world. And there, that's a whole dimension. But what I see in that one is that is the growing awareness that of the importance of us acting in public and being part of the public life of our communities, and the growing awareness that our actions, individual and collective especially, they matter, they make a difference, and they have an impact on the natural world, on marginalized communities, on the public systems that we're a part of, on all these pieces. But it's that growing awareness of our interconnectedness and of our sense of ourselves as leaders, and that we might have a public action like your piece about the biomass thing, right? So you might get that done, you might get a grant, and you might just get that project done. But we also want to add that, and that would be a success. But we also want to then reflect on, how did we grow as leaders in this process? How did our relationships develop in this process? What is the impact on marginalized communities in the natural world through that process? And so our learning and our expansion of ourselves, our understanding of ourselves as citizens of the world, I think really takes on a new dimension when we can practice reflecting on our actions in that public sphere. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording right now, and then we'll do a little bit more reflection on that in just a second.